immigration changes and the impact on the tech sector. I'm Jill McKerney, Head of Immigration and a Senior Associate in the Employment, Pensions, Immigration and Compliance, or EPIC team. And I'm joined by Pip Haig, who is an Associate in Team EPIC. We're delighted to be joined by our guest speaker today, Tim Bird, a partner in the corporate department at Field Fisher, whose practice focuses on tech and fintech companies. This webinar is intended for companies who currently hire or may wish to hire workers from outside the UK with a focus on the tech sector. This session is one of 4 webinars hosted by the Field Fisher immigration team in October and November. If you have any questions about today's topic, please use the question box on your control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We will then collate the questions and try to answer them during the webinar. If we don't manage to get to your question, we'll follow up with you afterwards. All of our sessions are available on our website and YouTube channel. So the UK has been an attractive destination for tech companies and their staff for years. According to the Department for International Trade, the UK is the 5th most innovative country in the world, with £184 billion in digital tech turnover in 2018 and $13.2 billion raised for tech startups in 2019. This creates strong demand for talent, and employers have often found it difficult to recruit, in particular to find experienced developers and to recruit their executive and sales teams as they look for people with the skills to grow the company and build the right culture. To date, EU, EEA and Swiss nationals, who together I will refer to as EU nationals, have had an automatic right to live and work in the UK. Non-EU nationals are required to obtain visa sponsorship, which brings with it costs, compliance and timing considerations. The free movement of EU workers will end on the 31st of December 2020, with a likely reduction in the flow of EU workers to the UK, and a new points immigration system will be introduced from January 2021. These are the most significant changes in UK immigration law in 40 years. These changes will require all businesses to take some kind of action, and we will look at what steps they can take to prepare. Given that the changes are only 2.5 months away, tech companies should be taking action now. We will look at the countdown to the new immigration system, business strategy and the right to work, and then we'll have a discussion with Tim, and then we'll look at sponsorship and employer options and business visitors. So first we'll look at the timeline. So free movement will end on the 31st of December 2020. The government has introduced an EU settlement scheme for EU nationals to preserve their right to live and work in the UK after Brexit. Any EU national who wishes to apply to the scheme needs to have arrived in the UK before 11 p.m. on the 31st of December 2020. Then from the 1st of January 2021, the new points-based immigration system will be phased in. A key feature of the new system is that it will put EU nationals on the same footing as non-EU nationals, meaning those arriving from 1st of January will require visa sponsorship to be able to work. It's worth noting that Irish nationals will continue to be treated as permanent residents after Brexit and will not require visa sponsorship. So a key point is that it's far cheaper and less onerous to apply to the EU settlement scheme than for a sponsored visa. Companies wishing to hire EU nationals should seriously consider bringing their start date in the UK forward to 2020 so that they can come to the UK and apply to the scheme. EU nationals wishing to apply for visas from 2021 will need a job offer from an employer, and the employer must hold a sponsor licence. As sponsor licence applications can take around 6 to 12 weeks or longer to prepare and process, we advise that companies start applying now. Finally, eligible EU nationals must apply to the EU settlement scheme by the 30th of June 2021. Those who have not applied by this date may need to obtain visa sponsorship to continue to work in the UK. So we've created a toolkit for what tech businesses should be doing to prepare for the changes. So workforce continuity and immigration compliance are key risk areas for businesses. You need to be able to recruit and move your staff as and when needed. Pip will take a look more closely later at the options for sponsors. However, we suggest a framework for taking action to secure and maintain your workforce. The first step will be to identify the current position. We suggest that you conduct a workforce audit to identify your EU population in the UK and UK population in the EU, and to identify any skills gaps you currently have or will have in future. Many EU nationals are independently choosing to move elsewhere in the short or long term due to Brexit or COVID, which may leave skills gaps. Secondly, we suggest that you review how the new immigration rules will impact your current processes, including recruitment, immigration policies, and compliance processes, and whether your team has any training needs in these areas. The next step will be to strategize. You should look at whether you need to apply for a sponsor license, or if you have one, to increase your allocation of certificates of sponsorship. We'll see that sponsorship carries with it additional costs. It will be crucial to budget adequately for these and allocate resources for managing the process. You may wish to consider if you can increase the sponsorship of non-EU nationals to fill skills gaps. Finally, you'll need to manage and implement the change. This will include communicating to staff members responsible for recruitment and management, updating processes, taking legal advice, and offering training to staff where necessary. So finally, I'm going to have a look at the right to work checks in the context of the upcoming changes. So UK employers are required to conduct right to work checks on all prospective employees and keep adequate records. Employers found to be employing an illegal worker can be subject to fines of up to £20,000 per illegal worker, and in some cases can be prosecuted for a criminal offence. The government guidance says that employers can continue to check the right to work for EU nationals in the same way as now until 30th of June 2021 by checking the person's passport or national identity card. Employers have a duty not to discriminate against EU nationals. You cannot require EU nationals to show you their status under the EU settlement scheme until after 30th of June 2021. However, you can ask if the employee is prepared to share proof of their status before then. We understand that when hiring EU nationals between 1st of January 2021 and 30th of June 2021, it's not required to check if the person is eligible to apply to the settlement scheme. However, if they do employ an EU national who requires visa sponsorship but has not obtained this, from 1st of July 2021, that person would become an illegal worker and will be required to immediately cease work. It may therefore be best for the employer to ask questions at the recruitment stage so that they can make a business decision on whether to hire, depending on the person, whether the person will require visa sponsorship and whether the business is willing to sponsor the person. You should ensure that your recruitment processes are not discriminatory. There may be cases where someone is eligible to apply to the scheme through a former period of residence, even if they have not lived in the UK for years. However, the simplest course of action, where possible, would be to bring forward hiring dates to 2020 for those new hires who are not already currently living in the UK or who are not already eligible in some way to apply to the EU settlement scheme. So we await further guidance from the government expected this year relating to the right to work checks for EU nationals. So now it's time for some input from Tim, our tech expert, who'll be joining Pip and I to talk about, or to have a discussion about these changes and how they're impacting on tech companies. So thank you very much for joining us, Tim.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you. So we came up with a couple of questions really just to kick off a bit of a discussion. So I'll start off with our first question, which is that presumably tech companies will be looking at impacts of Brexit on regulation, investment, trade, supply chain as a result of Brexit. So where should immigration rank in terms of the list of their priorities?
I think you're right that at the moment most tech companies have got a huge amount on their plates focusing on Brexit and dealing with regulatory change, challenges for their supply chain and the like. Yeah. As a consequence of that, I combined with the impact of COVID at the moment in particular, I think that it's fair to say immigration has, if not fallen off the list, has certainly been prioritized further down the list, and not necessarily because it is any less important, but because they're just in firefighting mode at the moment. So a lot of the transactions that we are working on, or pieces of corporate advice for clients at the moment, are very much responding to short-term needs, short-term funding gaps, and being opportunistic in investing or acquiring businesses across Europe. And as a consequence, we're not seeing a huge amount of questions about immigration. Most of the challenges are, things like dealing with redundancies or furloughing staff, or now bringing staff back from furlough, and all of the resultant knock-on effects for your day-to-day working environment. So I think it's a huge challenge for HR teams in particular to focus on longer term staffing needs, and we're seeing it within our own industry, but also anecdotally through our clients going through the first wave of redundancy discussions at the moment. So I think immigration will become more important, but my concern is that it needs to be higher up the list right now. And one thing that I've seen just in preparing for the discussion today, it surprised me that there hasn't been much press comment in the last 2 years about the impact of Brexit on immigration, particularly within the tech space. And I think that there's going to be a sudden realization that this needs to be thought through a lot more carefully.
Thanks very much. It's really useful to hear about what's happening in corporate field and in tech generally. So thank you. And I think we've seen much, I think, the same thing in terms of people firefighting on COVID. And I mean, I think there have been calls for trying to extend the deadline for Brexit, but I think that the transition period, but that's clearly, it seems that that's not going ahead. So I think that what we understand is that there is a high proportion of the tech workers in the UK who are EU nationals. So I think we saw a statistic somewhere that it was roughly 25 to 30% of tech workers are from the EU. And our understanding is that a lot of EU nationals are voluntarily moving away, either to simply to work remotely due to COVID, or to relocate. So with the new immigration system, it's obviously going to become a lot more costly, as we'll see later, to hire EU workers in the UK. And I think traditionally my understanding is that the tech sector's been the sector where there's a real shortage of talent.
There remains a huge talent shortfall. I've seen statistics that there are currently in the UK something between 1 and 4 million unfilled vacancies within the sector. So those are roles that have to be filled from abroad.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we probably don't really know is how many of the people working in the tech sector are freelance or self-employed, for example, or contractors, because the new system doesn't really provide any route for those people. So I think the concern there might be that people who, I think there are a lot of people retraining at the moment in the UK or have been training in recent years in the tech sector, and they may be coming in at a kind of a lower entry level to other workers, and maybe not meeting the kind of minimum skills and salary requirements for visa sponsorship. So it does.
Yeah, look, I agree. Those entering one of the biggest challenges is going to be that £25,000 threshold, where you might be bringing people into the industry who have either retrained or are very junior, but with huge potential. And I think employers will need to consider whether they need to start contemplating visa requirements alongside their early stage staffing needs or their junior staffing needs earlier than they would have done historically, particularly if they're looking at those coming from abroad who are over here in universities.
Absolutely, and it really is. It's only 2.5 months away, which is it's come up very, very quickly. So
may I chime in there? Tim, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think because of the dynamic way that technology is changing, I mean, so rapidly, how much do you think the UK is going to be impacted in terms of keeping up with the changes in innovation compared to perhaps other EU countries?
I remain an optimistic that investment levels are going to continue to be high in the tech sector in the UK. We historically, in terms of funding inflows from the US and Asia into Europe, the UK has always done historically quite well and grabbed the lion's share of investment. I still think there's a huge talent pool here. There's great stuff going on at universities focusing on artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, all sorts of sub-verticals within tech. And I think that I don't see that suddenly disappearing overnight, but I do think that a longer term view needs to be taken by workforces, because there will inevitably be some degree of chaos come the 1st of January. And I think, you can add to that at the moment that we're already seeing companies struggling with huge rafts of people working as consultants who, frankly, because of IR35, ought to be treated as employees. That's a conundrum on every transaction we deal with at the moment, where when targets are owner-managed businesses, they might come to us and say, "Oh, it's okay, don't worry about these people because they're consultants." Well, you don't scratch beneath the surface, and quite often they're working full-time for you. The other issue is that a lot of the staffing challenges, because of remote working, we're seeing UK nationals who have holed up during the pandemic in their holiday homes in Italy and Switzerland and other parts of the world, who have been there for such a long time now that there's a risk that they will be creating a permanent establishment for their employers. And I see that I think we need to keep one eye on the tax impact that sort of remote working might have. The flip side of which being, of course, if you can get the tax structuring correct, it might be one way of resolving the problems from an immigration perspective, to hire staff on a short-term contract and allow them to carry on working remotely from home outside of the UK, but still supplying their skills and services to you. So I think there's a huge range of different challenges that will all impact on your staffing needs day to day post January next year.
Sounds like it's definitely time to take stock then.
Absolutely. And then the one other thing I was thinking of that no one seems to have mentioned in any press publications that I've read recently. What about things like corporate governance? And there's a current IOD corporate governance review going on in the UK, with a view to making the UK's corporate governance much more focused on sustainability and diversity post-pandemic. And Britain entering into a new phase where we think about energy efficiency and the sustainability of our business practices and processes going forwards. How will a points-based immigration system and the loss of free movement of workers impact things like the ability for tech companies to hire females into the workforce, which historically the tech sector as a sector is I wouldn't say the worst offender, but certainly has struggled to retain female talent through the ranks. That's always been a challenge as it is, and I think that the points-based system might make that even worse. And then when you take the EU out of the equation and have to put the EU on the same footing as other non-EU nations when it comes to visa immigration requirements, will we see some companies steering towards some form of positive discrimination in terms of the countries that they favour when it comes to hiring their overseas workforce. So some really knotty problems, I think, for HR teams to have to worry about.
Those are all really, really helpful points. Very interesting, and a lot for our for the sector to think about, and for HR and managers and to consider. So I think that's all we've got time for the discussion. But thank you very much for joining us today. Your inputs really appreciated.
You're most welcome. Thanks.
Thanks. So now I'm just going to introduce Pip to talk about some of the solutions for employers.
Thanks, Jill. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to be looking about what options are available for businesses. So what can businesses be doing? So we're going to look at the EU settlement scheme. We're going to look at obtaining a sponsor license and sponsoring skilled workers. We'll look at STEM opportunities, and we'll consider if the business visitor route will assist. So when we're thinking about these options, it might be useful to have at the forefront of your mind the key topics that Tim mentioned, and think about what option or combination of options is going to work best for your business according to your short and your long-term goals. So first, the EU settlement scheme. So Jill has kindly set out the background to the scheme, including the deadlines. So here we're going to look at what the scheme involves. So applications involve completing a short online form. You upload an identity document like a passport or a national ID card, and you take a digital photo of the face, submit a national insurance number or a document confirming proof of residence in the UK. For those applicants who are new to the UK or have newly arrived before the deadline of 11 p.m. on December 31st of December 2020, this could be a flight ticket or accommodation receipts, for example. The application process is free of charge, and the application itself is personal to the individual making the application. So businesses only need to become involved technically at the stage of checking whether the individual has the right to work. So why take advantage of this scheme? So as I said, it's free of charge. And from the 1st of January 2021, those coming to the UK who are not eligible to apply will have to obtain the required immigration permission, and this could mean sponsorship. So if you can imagine the cost of obtaining a sponsor license and then sponsorship per person, businesses are going to be looking at, if they don't have one already, the creation or at least increasing their budget for immigration. We'll move on to this in the next slide, but safe to say, sponsorship places an ownership on the sponsor to comply with certain sponsor duties, which is quite a daunting prospect for those businesses, especially if it means that you're going to be taking on the responsibility for business immigration. So what can you do to ensure that your staff apply to the scheme? You may assume that your EU national employees already know about their legal position, but some people might not. So it might be worth communicating to EU national employees, signposting government guidance on the scheme. This is also a good opportunity to provide employees with support and assistance where necessary, and to reassure them that there's no risk to their right to stay and work in the UK, provided that they apply before the deadline of 30th of June 2021. Any support that you might provide now to your workforce could go a long way in retaining your existing workforce and reducing future recruitment costs. At the moment, there's about 3.7 million applications made, and there's a lot more to be made, so it's worth applying sooner rather than later. So what do you need to do to make sure that you're in compliance with right to work legislation? So Jill has covered most of this, but safe to say there's not going to be any change to right to work checks until the 1st of January 2021, and you're not going to be required to undertake retrospective checks on EU national employees. So the second option we're looking at today is business immigration focused and looking at sponsorship. So this route needs to be on the minds of businesses who either have a long-term plan to recruit from the EU, with a potential scenario that some individuals may not be eligible to apply to the EU settlement scheme by the 30th of June or beyond that date. So firstly, we're going to look at briefly, very briefly, the requirements to obtain a license and what are the requirements for a skilled worker visa. So to obtain a license, there are 4 key requirements businesses need to meet. The first being that you must be a genuine organisation operating lawfully in the UK. You must be honest, dependable, and reliable. You must be capable of carrying out your sponsor duties and evidencing compliance. And you must be able to show that you can offer genuine employment that meets the minimum skill and salary level. The decision to apply for a sponsor license should be part of a wider strategy, and it should be thought about by carrying out perhaps scenario planning, looking at the risks and opportunities, the impact of critical business functions, and upcoming changes in relation to the business's short and long-term goals. So this will involve creating workforce planning and compliance strategies to prevent disruption to the business. So as we've already mentioned, the new immigration system will mean that organisations will face restrictions on access to lower skilled labour. UK unemployment levels are currently high, and there's a larger pool of available talent here already. The current labour market will be thinking about upskilling and retraining into new areas, and this is what we touched on with Tim. This may mean that you might need to be thinking about tapping into different talent pools, upskilling or retraining existing workers, and looking strategically at international hires. We're going to look at this briefly in option 3. So what are the requirements to sponsor a skilled worker under the new system? The points-based system will provide simple, effective, flexible arrangements for skilled workers to come to the UK through an employer-led system. All applicants, both EU and non-EU nationals, will need to demonstrate that they have a job offer from an approved sponsor, that the job offer is at the required skill level, and that they speak English. They must also meet a minimum salary requirement. However, if they earn less than the minimum salary threshold, but no less than £20,480, they may still be able to come if they can demonstrate that they have a job offer in a specific shortage occupation, or that they have a PhD relevant to the job. So in effect, applicants will be able to trade characteristics such as their specific job offer and the qualifications against a lower salary than the minimum salary or the going rate in their field. And this is worth noting because at the moment, there are many tech roles in the shortage occupation list, such as IT business analysts, system designers, programmers, software development professionals, and the like. So along with the skill level, the minimum salary requirement is reduced. At the moment, this is £30,000 under the current system, or the salary stated in the job code, which best matches the role, and it's whichever is higher. So overall, this salary requirement is going to reduce to £25,600, or the salary stated in the job code, whichever is higher. So essentially, the overall minimum salary requirement will reduce. The role must meet the minimum skill level, and again, this is currently RQF level 6, which is degree level roles, and this is going to be reducing to RQF level 3, which is A level and equivalent roles. So we've got some examples of what this means on the next slide. So as you can see from this table, on the left-hand side, we've got graduate level roles, and on the right-hand side, we've got A level or equivalent roles, and these are all in the tech sector. So by comparison, at the moment, sponsorship is available for IT consultants, data communication analysts, programmers, web designers, and this is going to change. The skill level will reduce, and it will open up sponsorship to customer support analysts, help desk operators, computer repairers, for example. The caveat is that sponsorship is costly. So a 5-year visa can range between £6,000 and £10,000 per person. In addition, businesses may not be willing to take on employees where they've previously relied on contractors and agencies for the supply of labour. So when it comes to plugging skills gaps left by falls and EU migration, businesses need to weigh up the cost and benefits of sponsorship. So I'm just now going to do a very quick tour of the third option, which is STEM opportunities. So here we're going to be looking at students who are already in the UK who can apply up to 6 months in advance of their course ending, which is advantageous to businesses who can look to recruit students early. The postgraduate study system has been removed and there are reduced documentary requirements for this route. The graduate route, which is a new route launching in summer 2021, will allow graduates to apply for a visa to remain in the UK for 2 years after they've completed studies, so that they can start to look for work at any skill level. And then finally, we've got global talents. So this is a route open to EU citizens on the same basis as non-EU citizens. The most highly skilled who can achieve the required level of points will be able to enter the UK without a job offer if they're endorsed by the relevant competent body. At the moment, this is TechNation, who currently offer endorsement for those applicants with technical and business skills in the digital technology sector. So I'm conscious of time. I'm just going to flag up this slide, which basically says that there's another option, which is business visitors. So business visitors generally are granted for 6 months or less, and short visits are permitted only. Applicants need to be a genuine visitor, and this means that they come to the UK to carry out business activities, but a visa is required prior to entry in order to be able to work in the UK. So these types of business activities are restricted to permitted activities, which means they can't fill a role or provide short-term work within the UK, and they mustn't be paid in the UK. The length of the visit isn't determinative of whether a work visa is required, it's the substance of the trip. So what are they doing in the UK? The route itself is becoming a lot more popular with businesses planning one or a series of short visits to the UK, but we would highlight that to those businesses that this immigration route is complex, and it is likely that the rules may change in the near future, so we would advise getting legal advice before travelling under this route. So finally, we're going to look at the takeaways. So we've got less than 3 months to go. Things are changing rapidly. Keep yourself updated and keep communicating with those responsible for implementing the changes with your workforce. Take advice where necessary. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions that have come through, but keeping an eye on the time, unfortunately, we don't have time to address those today, and we will respond to those questions directly. So that's all we've got time for. Thank you everyone for joining today's session on immigration changes and the impact on the technology sector. We hope you found it useful. As mentioned, all our sessions are recorded and can be found on our website and YouTube channel. Thank you for tuning in. Please join us for our upcoming webinars, which are listed on the slide. Thank you for joining.